Hi, welcome back, Shu.
Okay, we'll wait a few minutes for everyone to come back. Yes, we'll wait a few minutes for everyone to come back, and then we'll do the reporting back and the closing ceremony. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for the rich discussions. I hope, at least in the breakout room I was in, was very fascinating, and the discussions were very good. I hope it was the same for you in your other breakout. Before we start, we will go ahead and have a reporting back from the 3 breakout sessions we had today, which was the first one was on the draconian law. The second one was on freedom of expression, and the third one was on regional solidarity. And basically what these breakout sessions were to brainstorm about 4 very practical next step actions we could take as a region to combat some of these crises and challenges we are facing. We know we've always been talking about challenges and assessing and analyzing challenges. It is now a time for us to really respond back in how we do that. And that's what a lot of the discussions in the breakdowns were. So we had 3 rapporteurs in each of the sessions. And we will have each of them come up and then talk for about 5 minutes and report back on the discussions. So fortunately or unfortunately, I was actually the rapporteur for the first breakout session, so you'll be hearing from me again. So I'll go ahead and report on what was discussed in the breakout session on draconian law. So the main points, just to kind of, I'm sure everyone knows, but draconian laws are laws being used not as to shield from unlawful state action, but to silence dissent, and which is really not what the rule of law is. And the trigger speaker of this session was Mr. Kingsley Abbott. He was the director of Global Accountability and International Justice, International Commission of Jurists. And just to kind of wrap up what he was saying, and of course, draconian law commonly are used to address national security, national order, and usually these are laws to protect the powerful, often contain very vague language that makes it difficult to verify what it's used for, and gives broad powers to the authority. And of course, these draconian laws carry severe penalties, as we, civil society, have been going through for the past couple of years. So some of the concrete suggestions and recommendations came out of it, which was very interesting. He pointed out before these draconian laws are passed, when they're in the draft state, of course, campaigning should take place, such as, and also it's very important to kind of lobby and encourage our, policymakers to ratify international human rights treaties or international human rights law, to have that embedded into national law. And then the civil society can work with political parties on that. And let's see here, and after the laws are passed, let's see, and there were, we could always, so one more thing before the laws, there was a very good example on Thai CSOs, how that they worked on the anti-torture and forced disappearance laws, and they worked with each other to draft a law that take into consideration these international laws, and which had something to be compared to with the government version of the law. So that could be a strategy. After laws are passed, what can we do? Monitoring and documentation is a must and be used for campaigning, and also to involve different UN mechanisms. And we also, regional advocacy is very important, working with regional groups, such as the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, and working with parliamentarians in our respective countries to conduct regional advocacy. Of course, UN, working on with UN mechanisms, working and conducting advocacy with other country leaders to place pressure on our respective countries and meet with embassies within the country we are at. And it was also highlighted that it's very important for donors to make sure to support national civil society organizations, listen to their analysis, and really work with them on how to support them to do what they do on the national level. So very important to support national civil society organizations. Even international organizations must also support national groups, help with campaigns, help with legal advice, and all that sort. And it's also important to equip national civil society groups with the technical capacity to go around security issues. And then it was also brought up by David from ICNL that civil society and government must have dialogue. Also, although this might be very difficult in certain contexts, but it is effective in spaces that are available. Institutionalizing working groups that include CSO and governments is very good. Drafting laws together, and even after laws are adapted, having these working groups work on ways to improve the implementation could be very helpful. He also mentioned emerging issues such as tech, artificial intelligence, climate change surveillance, and of course, digital technology. The understanding fluency of digital technology it could be challenging among civil society, how we could equip civil society with that fluency to make sure not only security training, but also to be very aware of the digital technology and the uses, and how governments and even private sectors use that. And also encourage civil society to engage with dialogue with other sectors like the Financial Action Task Force or Open Government Partnership, these international mechanisms and processes that we could utilize to continue campaigning on a larger scale. So hopefully that wrapped up. If I missed anything or if I said something wrong, I'm sorry. Please let me know and we could clarify. I'll hand it off to the rapporteur for breakout session 2. I believe that's Paul. I give you the floor.
Yes, hello and good afternoon. So in breakout session 2, we discussed freedom of expression under expanding authoritarianism. And it seems that there's in broad strokes, much of the discussion covered how each of our respective governments has used their pandemic response as the perfect excuse to become even more authoritarian. And but Gustav prefaced this by saying this has been happening even before the pandemic, that there has been a backsliding of democracy and democratic processes. And Seven's talk covered most of the region, saying that the legislation tends to, and budgeting tends to favor certain political parties and certain individuals, and re-centralizing power where it can be more easily controlled. And the pandemic also became a good excuse to enact repressive legislation against online and offline expression, and leading to a crackdown regionally on critics, which we have seen many versions of this in our respective countries. And there's also a rise in sedition cases in countries all over, and that again suppresses freedom of expression further. And moreover, the pandemic also meant having sensitive health data, medical data being exploited for other purposes, again to solidify an authoritarian government's grasp on power. And so most of the discussion covered how how freedom of expression was being repressed, and how these authoritarian governments are further trampling on human rights. And as Ed from the Philippines noted, that authoritarians have weaponized social media to fight critics and take control of the narrative, and to make themselves more popular than ever. So what happens here is it's hard to fight these fake narratives with facts, because facts are twisted, and it's also hard to combat it by being simply sincere, because there is a profit agenda on the part of social media companies that, it's becoming very lucrative for them. And the problem becomes, how do civil society organizations and media organizations combat this? And the answer that kept coming up is that it's to go small, and in the sense of having smaller community-based media organizations to ensure that other voices are heard, and and this will bring other narratives to the surface and make them part of the wider discourse. And this is more than just the work of the media, because this other CSOs can also help this. Other human rights defenders organizations can assist in doing this. And the other, and aside from going small, is to go regional. By placing international pressure on other countries, by being practically each other's watchdogs, we can the option of using diplomacy and regional and international human rights organizations. This can help put pressure on certain authoritarian governments to take a step back on their repressive activities. And this is just personal. This is just a personal observation throughout the discussion. There's still a lot of wait and see, because over here in the Philippines, our elections are next year, and then Malaysia expects a new Democratic Party in 2024, and of course Myanmar is still up in the air. So there's a lot of let's wait and see what the next step is, what next steps are possible. And in the meantime, the most concrete actions that were brought up is still looking for other stories that can be used to form counter narratives, and again to keep up our international and regional solidarity with each other, and to just help keep pressure on authoritarian governments to know that they are being watched. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. Next, I will ask Owen to come and give us the report from Breakout Session 3 on regional solidarity.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we did discuss building regional solidarity, enhancing civil society efforts in responding to the democracy crisis. And we had ADN's very own Ichal Supriyadi, who is our trigger speaker, and he brought up the idea that smaller and thematic coalitions seem to be working to be more workable, and while sectoral issues like bigger coalitions in convening arenas, generally the bigger and regional coalitions face certain difficulties in narrowing down their work to bring more direct impact. He recommended that we do a combination of both small and large coalitions so we can address the needs of solidarity and humanity issues, focusing both on political and non-political needs. So it's not just the political side. He posed a question: how can we enable mutual support together, no, about this? How to make this directly benefit the target groups. We need to strengthen international connections. We need to his suggestion also was to tap also the minority groups like the youth and the women, so that we can somehow reduce the gap between intergenerational needs as well. How do we translate this now? We also heard from Pradeep Baisak of GCAP India, who suggested that we should come together more by bringing the people themselves involved, because it's always been us. It's always been we've always been the voice of the people that we're representing, and perhaps we would make a bigger impact if the people themselves speak. He cited an example from Bangladesh where the parliament heard from the people themselves, and so it somehow made an effect. But JY from Hong Kong asked the question of what's the best way to exert political influence, because it seems that we all have our different alliances per country, but somehow we're not allied together. It was also brought up by Nin from Myanmar, how to communicate with the alliance network. We should have a common place or common source or a website to update the information. Shun Ling from the UK brought up the experience of the Milk Tea Alliance. They do have these little alliances, but they don't have the structure and the resources yet to build networks on different platforms. And so this is perhaps, he said, the next step in our evolution. A very good insight from Gus Miklat of IID. He suggested, he asked the question whether it's centralized or decentralized, and the answer to him was either or neither. If we centralize, we broaden the participation, there's more horizontal movement and more horizontal engagement, and it's perhaps more egalitarian. But how will you turn that into a policy advocacy? You'll probably need a core group or a secretariat to lead that process. Whereas for decentralized, he cited the example of the Occupy movement in the United States. That was sort of not sustained as much because there was no sustaining structure and process. So how do you sustain a decentralized movement in the long run and make an impact? He also, like Ichal, sees a need for intergenerational solidarity, a youth-led movement, perhaps guided by the more experienced from among us, to enable us to gain the power to achieve policy change. There's no ideal model. Okay, that's what we agreed on, but we need to respond to what the need is and the posture of the challenges. We should be responding to a combination of challenges, convene the people, address the non-political and political. We tend to get trapped in supporting certain big issues, which is not bad. For example, if Myanmar is top of mind, we all address that, but then other issues get pushed behind or do not get as much attention. So we need to help increase the visibility of other issues also. Ichal himself suggested that consolidators perhaps might need their own consolidators. It's something to consider. And from Dr. Shin, we heard from him, and he says in a difficult situation, activists should probably make more effort to get the support from the grassroots people. And so this sort of echoes Pradeep's suggestion as well. And William did point out that the farmers movement that has been going on for about a year or more than a year already in India did somehow yield results very recently. And so we do know that tapping the grassroots people and making themselves heard with our support perhaps can be more effective in getting the message across to the people we need to for them to hear. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Great. So we heard back on what was discussed and got a lot of good points and starting points for how we could go and take action in pushing back on this regression of democracy in our region. So I'm sure we're now coming to the closing of our second day. So after all these rich discussions from yesterday and today, so what next? What are we going to do with that? I will invite our Secretary General Ichar Supriyadi. He'll explain what we plan to do as the next steps as a follow-up after this assembly. Ichar, I give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I just very quick before closing. There are two strategic steps that we directly address after this assembly is concluded. First, of course, we will be preparing the outcome of the assembly, which is we're expecting to develop a document that reflects the CSO pointers in addressing or how to deepening democracy, or what we call how to address regression and to confront challenges right now. That perhaps will be submit to the authorities. Any authorities could be to share to the process of democracy summit that will be happening on December's, or other institutions. For their understanding if the Asia is producing this. That's document is will be includes reflections of different declarations or commitment statement that produced by ADN members previously, like we have Asia Africa Democracy Forum. We also have our partner Asian People Assembly and other things. For that, we are open to developing. We open invites friends to also contribute. So we'll explain how to engaging, but likely we will displaying and sharing. If you are interested, maybe it could be it will be through the Google Drive. You can only comment, but you cannot change the document, otherwise it's gonna be messed up. So it is like a policy paper that's submitted to the authority. And secondly, we also wish this document can be used as a guidance or guide or brief guides of the civil society who might need it in planning the future works. So these pointers will helping them to as a navigation. And the third, I think early next year's, which is maybe in another 2 months, we will start planning the next Asia Democratic Assembly. This time is very much earlier, and we're expecting the reflections, the outcome from these forums today will be also carried forwards as early as possible, and then we'll be opening more input and more inclusions for the upcoming Democratic Assembly. I think that's it, Sue, for now, what we're going to do with the results.
Okay, and also just to kind of, I'll just show the document to everyone. So kind of know what we're working with here. So we've already crafted a draft declaration of sorts. And as Ichar said, this will be kind of a policy paper, a recommitment of the Asian civil society to democracy. And hopefully it'll be that guide for us in a strategic agenda or strategic guideline to continuing to push back on the regression. We want your input. As Itar mentioned, I will produce a Google document of this where you could add in your suggestions. The link will be accessible on our website, www.adnasia.org. And then if you also registered to participate in this forum or assembly, we will email you the link, and we want to open this up to the whole civil society for you to come and comment, as this is your document and our document. So hopefully, and just to reiterate, once this is developed, we'll be sharing it with the various democracy processes that will be happening this year and next year. So that is that. Thank you, Ichar. And I will call now our highlight of the second day. Our closing remarks will come from ADN Senior Advisor, Dr. Hyung-Sik Shin. He's currently a professor at the Pukyong University. And I give you the floor, Dr. Shin.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. First of all, I'd like to express special thanks to speakers, panelists, and the moderators of the assembly, including ADN side sessions, for their valuable contribution. However, most importantly, I would like to thank you all, the participants. Without your input, ideas, discussion, this assembly would not succeed. Almost all the people in the world were living with the severe restrictions on civic space, with some governments using the COVID-19 pandemic as a pretext to introduce new restrictions that had nothing to do with fighting the virus and everything, with extending government powers and reducing the civic space. Meanwhile, the inequality between states in technology, income, digital, medical services is further exacerbating due to the pandemic. The rapid deepening of social polarization in the global neoliberal trend is worsening the socio-economic inequality. Thus, the value of freedom, equality, justice, inclusion, and solidarity must be strengthened. The pandemic has a significant meaning as an opportunity of transforming to start socio-economic democratization now. In fact, democracy around the world has stopped progressing in procedural democracy called political democratization. However, now we need to achieve a more democracy by promoting socio-economic democratization, which means substantial democracy. So how can socio-economic democratization be achieved beyond political democratization? One of the main measures is economic democratization. This is to establish a fair system among economic actors in the market, where large corporations have a huge influence. Next, another plan is to strengthen universal welfare policy to resolve severe polarization. There is a necessity to build a more equal society by alleviating the inequality in the market. In order to resolve socioeconomic polarization, it is necessary to reform the economic system, which was centered on large corporations, and to create economic structure in which small and medium-sized business and common people can coexist. The socioeconomic policy for the rich people is going to make the poor people explode with anger. In general, much emphasis has been placed on the democratization of political procedure. However, now we have to upgrade political democratization to the socioeconomic democratization. At the center of the trend toward the new socioeconomic system, there are the values of freedom, equality, justice, inclusion, tolerance, and solidarity. In order to overcome the global challenges, various social actors should improve the entire composition of a civil society, which accompany the expansion of public character and the qualitative deepening of democracy by strengthening the competency of the citizen. It is a time the international cooperation and solidarity are desperately needed more than ever. But unfortunately, the barriers and exclusion, not only between countries, but also within each country, are increasing. So we have to strengthen global citizenship education about solidarity, mutual understanding, and consideration of a global community. The pandemic was originated from the environmental crisis, such as the loss of biodiversity, the reduction of animal habitat, and the increase of greenhouse gases. The global efforts are urgently required to respond to the crisis in the climate environment. The importance of the sustainable development is increasing. In conclusion, the combination of education for environmental sustainability and the education for democratic citizenship is to be emphasized. In order to promote more democracy, lots of support, lots of cooperation, solidarity should be provided to democracy activists in Myanmar, Hong Kong, Afghanistan, etc. Finally, I learned a lot during the Democracy Assembly. I hope the outcomes of Democracy Assembly 2021 contribute to mobilize the more support, the more assistance for promoting democracy throughout the Asia. And I would like to convey my deepest thanks to the ADN Secretariat for their priceless efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shin, for those very inspiring words. And I think that comes our time to close the session. I just want to let everyone know, thank you to all the speakers, moderators, and all you participants who made time to join us. Even after all this webinar online fatigue, we really thank you for sticking with us. And of course, we want to make sure that all our colleagues, friends, comrades in Myanmar, Afghanistan, Hong Kong, all these different democracy movements happening, I'll let you know we are with you. We will continue to fight with you and always advocate for you. So please don't forget that.
Hello, presenters. I am speaking from Bangladesh. I am Mr. Habibur Rahman. I have some question. In South Asia, democracy was human rights does not play their proper role. But why? Please discuss it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your question. I think we will have to address that back separately through an email of what sort. Thank you again for that question raised, which is very valid. Thank you. Also, so that will be it. If we could have a group photo, everyone, just for the last time, just to show solidarity to all the movements out there. And then our communication expert will go ahead and take the photo. So if we could go 1, 2, everyone ready? Yes. All right. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you, and solidarity to you all.
Another one.
Have a
Sorry.
great end
Thank
of
you all.
day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
See you
all.
later.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you. Keep well.
Congratulations at the end.
You too, William. Thank you, everybody.
Warm greeting from Indonesia for all.
So looking good.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. You all too.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ichal.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks, everyone.